So hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's program. My name is Dr. Michelle Castro, and I serve as the director of for FIU in Washington, D.C. for Student Experience and Impact. And if you are not aware, Florida International University in Washington, D.C. is an extension of Miami's Carnegie R1 public research institution or university. We are renowned for producing minority graduates and leading innovations in environmental resiliency, brain health, and defense technologies. And here in Washington, D.C., FIU showcases impactful research, offers exceptional academic experiences and internships for students, and cultivates valuable partnerships with national stakeholders, all while bringing Miami's dynamic energy to the nation's capital. So I'm happy to introduce tonight's moderator, one of our student interns, Fiorella Perez.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for coming. My name is Fiorella Perez. I am a senior in Florida International University. I study political science with a pre-law track and a minor in criminal justice. I came to DC because I've always had a big interest in politics and in international relations, and what a better place to learn that but here. I am eternally grateful for FIU for the opportunity of being here. It's definitely taught me a lot. I am currently interning for Congressman Jimenez in the House of Representatives, and it's definitely been a great experience so far. So this week is Alumni Week, so I am very proud to introduce one of our very own, our first panelist, Erin Byrne. She will be answering some questions for the panel today. So before I go ahead and start with Erin, I will show the beginning video for FIU.
We may be guiding the largest ecosystem restoration project in the world, sounding the wake-up call on a Category 6 hurricane, producing more tech diversity than Silicon Valley, and transforming one of the most important cities in the U.S. But FIU talent also knows that making a real impact on
the big challenges we all face means entering the arena, being in the room where it happens, and leading our nation's research progress. So we're doubling down on the District of Columbia. We're here to provide diverse approaches to our federal research partners and in the halls of Congress, to convene our research collaborators from across the U.S. while creating engaging academic experiences for our students and bringing the magic of Miami to the nation's capital. FIU is a leader, redefining the American Research University, delivering on educational excellence, high social mobility, and high research impact. So join us and experience FIU.
All right. So before we get to the fun part and start asking Ms. Erin some questions, I will let her do a brief introduction of who she is, where she works, and what her experience has been like here in DC.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. This is very exciting to be able to chat with you today, kind of sharing a little bit about what I do and where I came from. I'm Erin Burr. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia and knew that I wanted to work in music. And so I moved to Nashville, Tennessee right after graduation. And I lived there for about 17 years. I worked at a major record label and got to promote a lot of really cool artists. So I did that for, like I said, quite a long time, and then made the move here to DC to be closer to family. And I work now for the RIAA, which is the Recording Industry Association of America, and I handle their media relations and gold and platinum program. So if you ever hear of an artist getting multi-platinum hits or diamond records, our office is the office that issues those, and that's I guess
Oh,
my start.
That's very cool. Okay. So the first question we have is, how have you seen the power of words shape narratives in the entertainment industry?
Well, that's a very great question. I know that attention spans can be very short these days. So, as newsrooms get a lot smaller and we have less and less people kind of reporting on anything that we're sending out, we have to make sure that the word choices we use are exactly what we mean. And that's important because I'll send out a press release, and sometimes I'll find that the press release itself is what's being used as the article. So I want to make sure that what I'm saying is getting to the right audiences and also in the way that I want it to. I think a really good example would be AI. So you all probably have some experience with AI. Is there anyone in the room that uses ChatGPT or any of the others? Okay. Okay. Well, that's all right. AI is very all-encompassing. It's not just one thing. And when it comes to word choice, it's important that we're not ambiguous because something like AI is still very new. It's a new technology that can sometimes be confusing. And so if you think about how AI is used in music and the conversation around that now, we have two prime examples. We have a Beatles song that was nominated for a Grammy. And a lot of people were saying, oh my gosh, it's AI, it's AI. But using it in a way that it was generative AI or something that was meant to be deceptive or not exactly what it was. But this technology really was just using and cleaning up vocals that already existed. So it wasn't AI in a negative vein, like a deep fake. It was something that had already existed. And so I just think it's important that we use words that describe exactly what we mean as opposed to letting other people come up with their own narrative. So that's just an example where people were kind of confused to begin with. And it was good that that got cleared up because it got nominated for a Grammy.
So I'm actually going to deviate from the second question for a moment. I'm going to ask a different question. So how do you in the entertainment industry deal with now that AI is outside as a person, with communications, how are you able to differentiate, first of all, and how are you able to, with your words, ensure that you communicate the right thing and not send the wrong idea to the press or to the people that you're communicating with?
I mean, it's a tricky thing. I don't think that you're ever always going to get it right or know exactly what to do, but I think that's where relationships come into play and making sure that the people that you're sending those messages to, whether you're an artist and it's your fans online, or if you're a publicist and you're pitching a feature in a magazine, just that you are able to connect with those people on a level to where they believe in you, they believe in what you're saying, and you can quickly make corrections if something is not factual.
Okay, thank you. Our second question is, what role does storytelling play in building a brand's identity and connecting with audiences?
Well, I think storytelling, especially when it comes to music and artists of all levels, whether they're musicians or visual artists, I think storytelling is where it begins and ends. That's the root of everything else that you're doing. And so you start with, what is your idea? What is the story that you want to tell? And then your visuals on stage, your wardrobe, the interviews that you choose to do, the way that you communicate with your fans online, all of those things go back to that one message, that one story. So it can constantly evolve, but everything still just falls under the story umbrella and goes from there. And sorry, not to interrupt you, but if I'm not answering something that, or you all have other questions, feel free to chime in too, not to interrupt your flow.
Please. So in an era of short attention spans, how do you craft a compelling message that resonates?
I think it goes back to a couple of questions that you always want to ask yourself. Who is my audience? And what is my most basic essence of my message? what is the thing that I want to get across? What is my goal? And I think if you start with those two things and then try to craft something that is concise, that is not overly inflated, and that will resonate with the people that you're trying to reach, I think that's where you start. I'll give a good example of that. So let's say we are posting something on our social media. We're probably going to use different messaging there. We're going to know the people that are engaging with our platform. We're going to know how they speak. There are going to be certain things that you're going to say or do on a TikTok that maybe you wouldn't use on your LinkedIn. Our CEO, if he has a message that he's making a statement on something, we're going to know, is this going to lobbyists on the Hill? Is this going to legislators? Is this going to a media outlet? And so you kind of tweak things from there, but you always want to have those couple of concise things that are going to be your through line.
What strategies do you use to make sure stories remain authentic while appealing to a global audience?
That's another great question. I think a lot of my examples are going to be based on working with artists and working in the music industry. So hopefully that will be exciting to you, and translate that into whatever, your preferred audience is. But a few things, I would say finding third-party advocates. So finding other people that are going to relay your message to their audience. I might not be someone that's speaking to policymakers every day, but that's why we have lobbyists. So there are third-party advocates to go and talk about what our issues are. There might be a professor that is going to talk about research that we've done, or an economist that's talking about how the music industry fuels a lot of jobs and a lot of money that's going in and out of the states. So third-party advocates is one. Another, I would say, would be your internal network or a team approach. So we, in country music specifically, would have artists go to radio stations across the country and in different countries. And so we would have what's called a radio regional. And basically, they would just be stationed in one state and maybe cover 10 states. They would work with local radio stations. They would have those relationships. They would know what are the needs of that community. And then they could promote the artists that way because they were already in the middle of it. So that's a good thing. Also, artists collaborating with other artists. Maybe you are someone who is from Boise, Idaho, and you write a song with a Latin artist. And then you're both using each other's audiences and using each other's credibility in the market to kind of expand. So those would be the main things that I would say.
Thank you. And then I have a little bit more of a fun, less serious type of question for you. If you could have one famous quote or phrase as your personal tagline for life, what would it be and why?
Well, I have to say I should be much better at this because I love every single Housewives show. I don't know if we have any Bravo fans in here, but I should already be on this. I don't know if it's a tagline, but it's something that I was thinking about before coming here today. So obviously, this is a panel on the power of words and communication. So I would say words matter, but your word matters the most. So, yes, crafting the perfect message is what we all strive for, but we're not always going to get it right. And so it's more important to, when you get it wrong, know that you have somebody in your corner that will help you navigate that they believe that you have good intentions and, maybe you say, can you help me get this story killed because it's either not factually correct or it's causing big problems, and then they will, in the future, work with you. Outlets will work with you again because they know that they can count on you. So that was a very roundabout way of saying, just be honest, be a good person.
So for one of the past answers that you had given me, I was gonna ask you, so in such a like fast-paced moving world, how do you stay relevant as far as like how do you use your words to stay relevant?
Well, I think it's important to have interns and to have people that are younger than you telling you what's happening in the world, listening a lot to, whether it is the intern or it's the CEO. I think that you should just try to get something from every conversation, not in a transactional way, but in a way that makes you think, oh, I never would have thought about it that way. Let me reframe this or reframe that. So I think that that's really important, just listening as much as you're talking.
Okay. Anyone from the audience?
What do you think about the Grammys this year?
I thought they were great. It was really interesting to see what was going to happen.
Beyonce and country.
Yeah. There's definitely some back and forth with the Grammys awarding her, the CMA's not. But I don't know. I think she put out a great album. I think it was a very cool tie-in that Taylor is the one that gave her the award. And I think anytime we can celebrate in a group of people, let's do it. I loved that they put such an emphasis too on LA and the city and the first responders. I love that the firefighters came out and gave out the biggest award of the night. I think everybody is doing the best they can in these really tragic circumstances. And so while it was a little touch and go, oh, should they do it? Should they not? It seems like they really had their communication going with all of the different people across LA, making sure that it was safe, that they weren't taking hotels, that they weren't taking resources away from the community. And I think it was a good night. I hope everybody watched or at least saw a clip the next day of one of their favorite artists.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah.
So this was on a point you mentioned way before near the beginning when it came to the use of AI content, specifically when you mentioned the use of, like it was a Beatles song, and I think there was a lot of controversy whether it was real or isn't, and it made me really wanted to ask, when it comes to your industry, how exactly does it adapt when it comes to the use of AI and generative content, especially as more time it progresses, it becomes a bit more difficult to distinguish, what is genuinely a genuine content and what is something that is artificially produced. How do you go about that distinction, and especially when it comes to the adaptation later on of the industry to sort of avoid giving recognition to something that was purely generative?
Yeah, I think that in terms of our industry right now, I think that we have all kind of collectively determined that there needs to be a human element. There needs to be some sort of human touch for something, to be awarded a Grammy, or, for fans to be able to really connect with something and say, I believe in this artist, I believe in this project, I believe in this song. Part of our goal at the RIAA has been to work with legislators on a few different bills, one being the No Fakes Act. And basically what that does, it would be a federal voice and likeness protection. So you wouldn't be able to have something like the fake Drakes of the world. Artists and individuals wouldn't be able to say, that's not me, that's a voice clone, that's a deep fake, I did not give permission to this, it has to be taken down. Like, there could be repercussions. So no fakes is a big one. There's also the Elvis Act in Tennessee, which does something similar. We're also working with different bills that have to do with transparency. So you know exactly where this came from, what training data was used, and if something is AI generated or if it's not. So I think that as far as our industry is concerned, with every evolution of technology, there's always been that human genius. You always need that creative spirit, that lived experience. And we think that if someone's going to use that and use that work, that there has to be credit, compensation, and there needs to be some labeling, because we're not in the business of trying to, fool people. We want you to know that this is real and this is someone's life work.
Question. Like as you meant the Beatles, what about like royalties or, infringement or copyright?
All of those things.
Yes, I mean, you have to be so careful. Like Alan Dixon, he was done after that because he lost his case with he took something from, I think it was Marvin Gaye, and he couldn't, blurred lines. So he was done after that. His musical career was over. So, I mean, even musicians have to be so careful, like, not even with AI or anything, like using music without paying royalties or getting the permission.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think that that's why there are systems that are put in place. There are now licensing systems when someone is using your music on television or on Spotify. So there are ways that people are paid and they are credited because it's theirs and they own it, and they should be able to make a living from it. I'm not really sure I'm answering your question, but yes.
You're putting like an AI, because AI could pick up anything, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing too. I mean, we have a lawsuit against Suno and Udio, who allegedly are taking a bunch of content from artists and using that to train their platforms. And they're not the only ones. So I think that you'll end up seeing more litigation and legislation around this because it's so important to get it right. And it's not just for musicians. It's, like I said, for all sorts of creators. Anyone whose image can be stolen. And for people like us sitting right here. I mean, I can't imagine being a child right now and having the internet be so ingrained in your daily life. All it takes is one online bully doing something that is just, can be so horrific to people. So I hope that we get it right. I know that we don't want to stall innovation. We want things to keep moving. We want it to be helpful for society, but we don't want to take away jobs. We don't want to take away someone's life work. I think it's just an interesting time right now, and I hope that those guardrails get sorted through.
Hi.
Would you have a policy recommendation for lawmakers in regards to AI?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that we're doing already with the No Fakes Act. I think that's a big one. I think voice and likeness is huge. I think that is something we've got to protect first and foremost. And then again, with the transparency of knowing what platforms have already taken and used, because you have to remember too, this is someone's work that they're not getting paid for, and that something is being spit out that will compete with them in the market and also confuse their fans. I mean, how would you feel if you spent 10 years building up this giant fan base and then this exploitive AI comes out and is like, oh, well, this artist said this or that or created this new song, and it just creates confusion and yeah. Hi.
So this is a little more correlated towards acolytes. So currently during the Oscar season, they nominated Adrian Brody for an Oscar, in which in the movie he actually uses, well, I wouldn't say he, but the post-production uses AI to alter his accent, and yet he's still being nominated for an Oscar. So, well, how do you feel about artists in general? Because at the end of the day, like acting, art, music is all under art being awarded through after the use of AI. Do you think that that should be like something that like is okay? What can it encourage? I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it depends on how it's used. I think it depends on, if it's completely AI generated and it doesn't have any of that personal touch, any of that personal artistry. Like, he obviously performed, he acted, and then something tweaked his voice to be able to kind of fit with the movie. I think that that's a little different. That's kind of auto-tune, if you will. Now, I think if if it wasn't him at all, I think that would be different. But I mean, I don't know. I think it goes back to too, like we were talking about, kind of what strategies do we use in PR to make sure that no matter where you are across the globe, that the same message is able to be told. I think it's kind of in a similar vein of where you have an artist from the US that is performing with an artist from Sweden, and they're wanting to be able to honor the local language, and I would imagine that would be a similar case. How do you feel? What is your thought?
I think that it's a little, I think it encourages people, specifically like actors, like I'm not an actress or anything, but I think it would like encourage that like use of, I don't have to train like my voice anymore to like a different accent. Like a lot of British actors, for example, train to have like an American accent, so they act in, I guess, like American based movies. So in a way, I think that it can like encourage that like lack of I don't know how to put it, more like
discourage the creativity in their accents.
Yeah, or like also just like putting yourself into that character, and I think that can like detract, which at the end of the day it's also like nice because now they don't have to like do all that, but then it's also like admirable when actors do that. So I think that it can like kind of thread like on a very dubious line of whether it's good or it's bad, and I mean a lot of people have just been like wondering whether it should even be like awarded or nominated.
Yeah, and I mean that's a very interesting and valid point that you're making too. It's just really tough. I think a lot of things are going to be case by case, and I think a lot of times you're going to have differing opinions. But I guess we would have to ask him, like, what was his intent? Did he just not want to take the time to learn the accent? Was it not something that he could do? Yeah, that's interesting to think about.
Like, just another point, I feel like the case by case basis is also super important, especially like again like in art. There's like this it's a bag brand called Bagu, and they did this collab with Colleen Estrada, which is a like a fashion house. And Colleen Estrada, their prints were actually hand painted, but then they used AI over it, so it would do like an overlay that looked a little like, I guess, wacky. And then they just put it into like the collab, and a lot of people were complaining that it was like AI art. But it's more like artists using AI as a tool to enhance the art, but the original product itself is their own work. So you can also make the case that it's like, it's art and they're just using it as a tool, just like a couple years ago digital art wasn't really taken seriously.
No, you're exactly right. And that's a main point that we're trying to make in a lot of what we're talking about with music as well, and the advancement. It is a tool, and it shouldn't be a replacement, and it can't be a replacement. Like, can you imagine if you started training everything on what I'm saying right now, and then all of the output of that would be trained on the same thing? So you're just going to have things that feel repetitive and kind of soulless, in my opinion.
Well, I had another question for you. So everyone in this room right now, like majority of us, we're all like in this age where we're trying to figure out, what to do with our own lives or our own aspirations. And we are in a panel for communication. So like, how do you get there? You know what I mean? Like, how did you start, and how did you know what you wanted to do, and how did communicating effectively with the people around you help you succeed?
I would say I had a lot of luck, a lot of fearlessness when I was younger. I think a lot of you hopefully are still in that I want to make it work, that hustle mode. I said earlier, I grew up in West Virginia in a very small town. I went to college there. I actually didn't really want to go to college. I wanted to just move straight to Nashville. I loved country music. I wanted to be in the middle of it. And my parents said, you have to get a degree in something, pick something. And I always really loved to write. I loved to talk. I was, the typical younger child where you feel like you're the center of everyone's universe. So it just naturally felt like public relations was a good fit for me. I went to school, I got my degree. During spring break my senior year, all of my girlfriends were going on cruises and going to the beach and doing all of the fun things that you're supposed to do in college. And I said, well, I'm moving to Nashville, so I better go find a job. So I went down and I did not know a soul. I was not lucky enough to have an internship like you guys have, that you're right here immersed in DC and the thing that, you probably want to do as at least part of your future. And I just started walking in and out of places. Most of the offices in Nashville at the time were on Music Row, 2 streets in Nashville, basically 16th and 17th Avenue. And you could still kind of just walk in. So I introduced myself to some people and I ended up getting hired and moved to Nashville 3 weeks after graduation. And since then, I feel like, I don't know, every time I've been ready to make a jump or ready to do something new, I either had already built a relationship to where I could call on someone and say, oh, can I make this leap? Or the universe just kind of told me, all right, it's time to do this or it's time to do that. During COVID, we still lived in Nashville, and I don't know, it felt different, and I started wanting to be closer to my family at that point. And my sister lives here in DC. My parents and grandparents are still in West Virginia. And so I was like, all right, universe, here we go. So we moved here and I was still doing my other job. And then the RIAA job came up right when it was about time that Big Machine was going to say, we all have to go back to the office. So I don't know. I think just put it out there what you want to do, and in some way it will come to you, even if it's not the way that you wrote down on paper that it would.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is a silly question, but who has been so far your favorite artist you have worked with?
Oh, that's an easy one. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar, but Reba McEntire, hands down my favorite.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, I love her.
Well, she would love to hear that. No, she's great because she has done so many things, and it was really interesting to me working with her how many of her fans knew her from the TV show and how many of her fans knew her from music, but not a lot intersected. So I thought that was really cool, and she did a master class. She is a master class. She shows up early, she gets to work, she hits every single talk point she needs to, but also makes it feel so effortless and like you're talking to your best friend. Plus, she's super talented, but yeah, that would be my favorite. Who's your favorite?
Billie Eilish.
I really like her too. I think she should have won. That's why I mentioned it. She's very good.
Yeah.
Do we want to get some closing words from you? Anything you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to recommend to us?
I would just say take advantage of every opportunity. I would not close the door on anything, even if you think, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, or I don't know if this is going to serve the greater purpose that I want for my life. Do it anyway. And travel as much as you can. Talk to as many people as you can. And don't make things transactional. Like, really get to know people. And I don't know. I feel like it all works out. There's my positive note for you all for the evening.
Where would you recommend we travel?
Ooh. I am a big fan of Paris. I do not speak the language. I do not read it, but I just love the vibe. And in the US, I would say somewhere on the opposite coast of where you grew up. For no other reason than you're going to find something unexpected and you're going to experience something that, you know, maybe you wouldn't have. It's good that you're all here now. I imagine not all of you are from the DC area. So, great first step.
Well, thank you, Ms. Erin.
Thank you guys for having me.